In the rural town of Grubbs in Jackson County, Arkansas, the roads run long and quiet. The fields stretch out past small clusters of houses. With a population just over 300, the place feels like the kind of community where people recognize every truck that passes and every face that walks into a store. That sense of safety was the backdrop of Sydney Sutherland's life. Sydney Sutherland was 25 years old. She was born to Maggie and Dion, the youngest of 3 children. Her 2 older brothers, Tyler and Sam, had always been protective of her. Maggie and Sydney were especially close, speaking many times a day and spending as much time together as they could. Sydney was known for a bright personality and an easy smile. Friends described her as outgoing, supportive, and the kind of person who could sense what you needed before you said it. She lived with her boyfriend of 4 years, Alex. She loved long walks with her dogs, working out, shopping, and being around her young nieces, who called her Aunt Sassy. She had graduated as an outstanding senior, and her yearbook quote captured how she lived. "The meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away." That same spirit followed her into her work. Sydney was a nurse at Harris Medical Center, a job that fit her personality perfectly. Caring for people was not something she did for praise. It was simply who she was. In the summer of 2020, Sydney and her family took a trip to Destin, Florida. They returned home on August 18th. The next day, August 19th, Sydney was back in motion, as if she was already resetting her life into its normal rhythm. Ring camera footage captured Sydney outside her home, pulling things from her car. She was wearing workout clothes. She had been at the gym for about an hour with her trainer. She was unpacking and getting ready to return to work. Before settling in, she went to visit Maggie to drop off some mail. At Maggie's house, the conversation was ordinary and familiar. Sydney said she was heading home to bake brownies or cookies. She also wanted to get a run in. Maggie warned her not to push herself too hard. Sydney worked out almost every day, and even after already going to the gym, she still wanted to run. The weather was warm, and a jog felt like a way to clear her head and enjoy a little time alone. As she walked out the door, Sydney told her mom she loved her and that she would talk later. Maggie called back that she loved her too. Sydney went home, set up her Apple Watch, and left her house to run. That run lasted only as long as it took for the world around her to change. At around 2:30 to 3:00 p.m., UPS driver saw Sydney jogging along State Highway 18 between Newport and Grubbs. It stood out to him because there was almost nothing else happening on those roads. No crowds, no busy sidewalks, just empty stretches, a few houses, and farmland. Sydney was easy to remember because she was the only person out there. Nothing about her looked wrong. She wasn't limping. She didn't appear distressed. She looked like someone doing what she always did. But as the afternoon passed, Sydney did not come home. Alex was at home waiting. At first, he likely assumed she was finishing her run, cooling down, taking her time. But the silence stretched. He hadn't heard from her. He called Maggie. Maggie hadn't heard from Sydney since she left her house earlier. Sydney's phone went straight to voicemail. Her Snapchats hadn't been opened in hours. Texts were unanswered. That was when the fear became unavoidable. Sydney was not the kind of person to vanish without a word. She would never let her family worry like this, and the longer her phone stayed silent, the more the possibilities narrowed. Had she fallen and hurt herself somewhere out of sight, or had someone taken her? In Grubbs, serious crime was rare. That was part of what made this so frightening. A place built on familiarity suddenly felt uncertain. As it grew darker and the temperature dropped, the search began quickly and intensely. By 7 a.m. the next morning, the effort had expanded into something massive. Sydney's family was out. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office was out. Multiple agencies joined in. Search teams spread across roads, fields, and ditches. People walked shoulder to shoulder across open land, scanning for any sign that didn't belong. During a short break, Maggie spoke with a local farmer known as Quake. He had been a couple of years ahead of Sydney in school. He was familiar, the kind of person you recognized in a small town. Quake told Maggie he had also seen Sydney jogging, and nothing looked wrong. She didn't seem injured. He didn't see anyone following her on foot or by car. Sydney had taken her phone and her Apple Watch with her. Phone pings showed her last general area, not far from where she had been seen. Then, the next day, searchers found her phone on the ground. It wasn't damaged. It was less than a quarter of a mile from her home. That detail hit hard. A phone doesn't end up on the ground like that without a reason. It suggested a struggle, an interruption, a moment where Sydney's control over her own movement ended suddenly. The search continued through the next 24 hours, growing to around 300 volunteers. The more they searched, the more dread settled into the community. Sydney was 5 feet 3 inches tall and weighed about 103 pounds. On an empty rural road, it would not take much force to overpower her. Maggie searched relentlessly, scanning the ground and the edges of the road like she was trying to read the story of what happened through small traces. At one point, she found something tiny, a small white bead. She recognized it immediately. It was from Sydney's bracelet. That bead was more than jewelry. It was proof that Sydney had been there and something had happened in that exact area. By Friday morning, August 21st, the search resumed with renewed urgency. Authorities said they were working several leads, and within hours there was a major development. A suspect was taken into custody. At first, the person was not publicly identified, only transported to the Jackson County Jail. But later that same day, the missing person search became a recovery. Sydney Sutherland's body was found buried in a shallow grave in a field near where everyone had been searching. The medical examiner determined she died from multiple blunt force injuries. The town that had felt so safe was now holding a reality it could not absorb. Vigils formed. People gathered to honor Sydney, focusing on the kind of person she had been. Friends described her as a firecracker, sassy, loving, caring, and compassionate. In a small community, grief doesn't stay private. It spreads through every family and every road. 2 days later, investigators named the suspect. It was Quake, the same Quake who had spoken to Maggie during the search, the same Quake who had joined search efforts and inserted himself into the center of the community's fear. He had joined Facebook groups. He had offered comfort. He had even hugged Maggie, standing close enough to her grief to feel it, while knowing exactly why she was suffering. Maggie remembered that hug and the moment something felt wrong. She had walked back to the group with a strange feeling she couldn't shake. Quake was a 28-year-old local third-generation farmer. He was married and had 3 stepchildren. He managed around 6,000 acres of land. His family was well known in the area. They had even been named Jackson County Farm Family of the Year in 2016. Sydney and Quake knew each other. They had once been Facebook friends, though it was never made clear how close they actually were. Quake placed himself directly on the radar by going into the station and telling authorities he may have been the last person to see Sydney alive. He and his father gave permission to search his pickup truck, and that search revealed something immediate: blood on the tailgate. Data from Quake's phone placed him near where Sydney's phone had been found. Her body was located near his farm. CCTV footage from his home showed him leaving in his truck and later returning with a dent. Quake admitted he hit Sydney with his truck. He claimed it was accidental, saying a cloud of dust obscured his vision, but the sequence that followed destroyed any attempt to make the event seem like a panic-driven mistake. He said he put Sydney into the truck. He drove for a while. He took her clothes off. He sexually assaulted her. Then he buried her. He also told detectives that he placed the clothes he was wearing during the killing into a laundry basket at his mother's house. During searches, police collected items including a black shirt with blonde hair on it and black and pink shorts. Quake was charged with capital murder, rape, kidnapping, and abuse of a corpse. He pleaded not guilty and was deemed competent to stand trial. If convicted, he faced the death penalty. His wife filed for divorce, and investigators confirmed she had nothing to do with Sydney's death and had no idea her husband was capable of such violence. Later allegations surfaced about Quake's behavior over time, claims that he had been someone to watch, including reports of peering into women's windows and stalking younger girls. But the case itself already showed what he was capable of when he decided to act. Authorities believed Quake had been traveling westbound on County Road 41 when he saw Sydney. They believed he turned around quickly, hit her on purpose, abducted her, put her in the back of his pickup truck, drove away, assaulted her, and buried her. Sydney's funeral drew an enormous crowd. So many people wanted to say goodbye and support her family that the service was streamed so others could attend from a distance. Quake maintained he did not intentionally hit Sydney. He told a psychologist he tried to forget about the murder and continued his routine, going to work like normal. He insisted to himself that he did not kill her on purpose. But what he admitted doing afterwards showed planning, control, and a clear understanding of wrongdoing. Eventually, prosecutors discussed a plea deal with Sydney's family. The family agreed. The death penalty was removed from the table. The kidnapping and abuse of a corpse charges were dismissed. In exchange, Quake would admit guilt for capital murder and rape. Sydney's family wanted justice, but they also wanted the case to end without years of extended court proceedings. They wanted the truth locked into a final outcome. In court, Quake admitted to capital murder and rape. Maggie gave a statement and demanded he look her in the eyes as she spoke. She reminded him that Sydney was not his to take. She told him that the hands he hugged her with during the search were the same hands he used to kill her daughter. She made clear that true justice would have been Sydney living. Not a sentence, not a plea, not a courtroom ending. Nothing could restore what was taken. Quake was sentenced to life in prison without parole. 408 days after Sydney left for that run, her family finally heard the legal system close the case with a final punishment. Quake would never be free again. He would live the rest of his life behind bars. In the months and years that followed, Sydney's presence did not disappear from Grubbs. It lingered in the way communities remember their own, through events, memorials, and names turned into landmarks. People continued to hold runs in Sydney's honor, often wearing her favorite color, pink. One annual event became known as Finish Sydney's Run. With every mile, participants carried the idea that Sydney did not get to finish her run, but the community could finish it for her. The overpass at Highway 67 and State Highway 167 near County Road 41, close to where she had been running, was renamed the Sydney Sutherland Memorial Overpass. The small white bead Maggie found during the search became something she carried with her, a piece of Sydney's last path that never left her. The Sutherland family worked on creating a foundation in Sydney's name. A scholarship was established for Arkansas State University students pursuing education in the medical field, tying Sydney's memory to the kind of future she represented: care, purpose, and service. Sydney Sutherland left her home on a warm August day to run a route she knew like the back of her hand, a road she had likely traveled since childhood. A road that felt ordinary, safe, predictable. And in a place where everyone thought they knew everyone, Quake saw her, turned his truck around, and ended her life. The search that followed brought the town into the streets, into the fields, and down the ditches, with hundreds of people working under the belief that Sydney could still be found alive. But the truth was already buried in a shallow grave near the very land Quake worked. Sydney's story did not end with that grave. It continued in the runs that still happen, in the overpass that carries her name, in the scholarship that sends future nurses and medical workers forward, and in the way Grubb speaks of her as if she is still present. Not in the way she once was, but in the way a community keeps someone close when they refuse to let them be forgotten.